think so. Okay, let's go ahead and start with this last third section of the lecture. So this, we're going to talk about the 3 keys of Syntropic. This is a way to organize this information that I created. It's not like the Syntropic principles. Anybody who's tried to learn from Ernest directly knows that he doesn't have a structured set of teachings yet. So it's like everybody, different people that learn from him in different areas have different ways of making sense of these random puzzle pieces we got. And this is my way of trying to simplify it, and it's worked really well. And what I find is people can remember these 3 principles, and then when you're in the garden and you're having a problem, you can go back and ask yourself, okay, I have a problem here. Did I cultivate a consortium, or did I miss something? Did I remember to cut when I'm supposed to and manage? Did I remember to cover the soil? And usually your problem's going to be with one of those 3 keys, okay? So we also call them the 3 C's because each term is a C term. Cultivate, cut, and cover. So that's going to be your homework at the end. I want everybody to remember those 3 terms. So let's go into those 3 and what they mean a little bit in these next slides. So cultivate a consortium. A consortium is our attempt to mimic a natural forest. And to do that maximally, we want this density. And we want it to stay dense over the time. Okay, this is the solar panels to charge the soil battery. So the consortium is creating that system that will do that. This is an image from Haiti. It's probably a 2-year-old agroforest system. And I liked it because it really shows this density. You can see how everything's like, every space is being filled. So the next question is, well, how do you create the density like that? Actually, I'll go back to this slide before I show you that. And the way I break it down in my mind is there's 3 dimensions or 3 directions that we want to consider. The first is the horizontal, maximizing the horizontal spacing. I'm not going to go into that because people already know how close to plant plants to so they don't conflict. You plant your corn at X, Y, and Z spacing, okay? But in addition to horizontal, there's vertical, and then there's the dimension of time. So as some plants are dying, you want the space to be filled by other plants coming in. So with those 3 spacings, I'm not going to go into horizontal, but vertical, we learn to fill the vertical space by using a principle called stratification or stratum levels. And there's lots of different ways you can categorize these, but in nature, I don't think these exist. It's just our way of helping us to see things and make sense of them so we can plan and design correctly. And this, I have found that you only really need to break it down into 4 levels. And at the simplest level, you just need to know whether the tree or plant likes sun or does well in shade. And if you can kind of break it into those 2 categories, you'll be able to know where to put it in the right place on your farm. So if you, there are plants that need full sun, and there are ones that need a little bit less full sun, some that need mixed sun and shade, and some that can do well in shade. And by mixing those, you can see how we can fill that vertical space to maximize the solar absorption.
Would you always choose non-deciduous? Because here in our climate, obviously we have a lot of trees that lose leaves over the winter.
Yeah, so did everybody hear that question? Do we always want the evergreen trees? And no, not always, because it can be hard to prune. And for example, citrus, it's easier to mix that with a deciduous tree, because citrus needs shade during its vegetative state, but when it's fruit and flower induction, it does better with a little bit more sun. So if you're going to have citrus is considered medium. So but it's a funny medium because for part of its life, it likes more sun. So ideal association would be to have a tree above it that shades it, during the time it likes shade and then drops its leaves, which in Haiti that we use cederella and mahogany. Those will drop their leaves around the time of flower induction, and if you didn't do heavy pruning, it's a good association. But I see your point. You know, if you want maximum solar absorption, in general, you want to choose trees that are always going to have leaves on them. Okay, and tomorrow, for those who come back, we'll go into more detail and a working definition for these different levels and stratification as a whole. So you could walk out there and try to identify different species and know where to put them. But for today, I just want you to know that this helps us build a consortium by filling the vertical space. And then the dimension of time, we fill that by understanding and applying the principle of natural succession. And we've talked about that already, but it's nature's way of creating fertility, and it does so by taking plants that are short in their life cycle, that prepare the soil conditions and improve them for the next plants that are coming. And as you progress, you have plants that are longer and longer living. And again, in nature, there's no categories, but I found that if for an agroforestry farmer, it's helpful to break it into at least these 4 categories. And Ernest has way more categories for all these, just so you know. These are like what we use in Haiti. For Ernest, for stratum levels, he'll say in a rainforest, Amazon jungle, you can have 12 or 13 different stratums, and it gets really complicated. But for simple design and planning, we can break it down into these. And so placenta is a term Ernest likes to use for the plants that grow before the forest is maturing, and because he visualizes it as that is feeding the baby, which is the trees that you want. So
I would have assumed that would have been your input as a doctor.
Yeah, I'll just no, that comes. Ernest likes to humanize it. So, and then this is just this is a busy slide, but there's not much here to say other than just a visual to say, okay, here we're trying to include the vertical and the time dimension. And then of course there's a horizontal dimension to really charge that battery in the soil. So this is this is a final picture and to try to visualize a consortium. So cultivating a consortium, that's our first C. Any questions with that first one? At this point. So the second C is cut or to prune, and we talked about that earlier in the slide, how that's important for creating space. But really the most valuable result of the pruning is it stimulates growth. So we use it strategically when we want a fertility response on the land. And I know some people here have studied syntropics. Can anybody tell me how that could stimulate growth?
Makes the plant think it's being eaten, and it sends all of its nutrients to the top bit.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it. So it's like a stress to the plant, it's a disturbance, and it's going to come back stronger.
Yeah, some weeds can involve diseases that can destroy the skins, so when you remove them out, the plants can grow nice.
So it's kind of like pruning you can use to remove dead and decaying, parts of the plant that could attract disease.
The pruning also stimulates more production of this growth hormone, and that growth hormone then stimulates that plant and its surroundings to grow.
Very, very good. So that's the. So what she said is that you get a growth response in the pruned plant that is transmitted to everything around it. And to understand why that happens, it's first important to remember that plants have a life cycle just like people do. When the plant is young, there is a period of accelerated or fast growth, lots of vegetation. As a plant gets a little older, the growth slows. This is when you might see flowers. When fruit formation's happening, the growth is even slower. And then as it's starting to seed, the plant is aging. And for example, with wheat, they find the whole plant actually gets dry. Most people know wheat field because it's brown. What also gets dry is the fungal associations in the soil below it. The entire system has this aging response, and then the plant dies. The value of pruning is when 90% of plants will tolerate, and trees, a pruning. And when you do that, it sets it back to the growth phase. It's like the fountain of youth. So that plant is going to say, okay, we just got hit. It's time to grow again. And that benefits the plant that's cut. But as she said, most importantly, it also benefits all the plants in its zone. So if we're planting a pruning tree next to a crop plant or tree, then our crop benefits. It will also feel that stress. Remember that soil food web I showed? How the fungi allows the plants to communicate. So you get a strengthening in the immune system and a strengthening in a fertility response. There's probably a lot of ways it happens. There's this gibberellic acid, which is like a growth hormone released. Those soil exudates we talked about, the sugars, they're kicked into hyperdrive after pruning because the plant needs more resources. There's also volatile substances released in the air after a pruning now that studies show from like chopped leaves will tell a plant to get stronger. There's just many ways the plant starts signaling time to grow. Okay? And the opposite is true. So when you have a rapidly growing plant telling everything else to grow around it, if you have an aging plant, it's also telling everything else around it to slow down. This is why it can be hard to grow a new tree under an existing mature canopy. You could plant that tree so it's north side getting lots of sun. It still will grow slowly because of the suppressive effect if it's connected by that soil food web, right? So you would, and if you had a large tree in your garden, then the trick would be to reset that garden, which means cutting the tree either down or cutting it down to like the bone, the skeleton, so that that tree starts to grow again, and then you'll get a growth response from what was causing an aging response. Of course, depending on, it can be challenging depending how big the trees are. Or sometimes we encounter trees that are valuable in Haiti right in the middle of a field, like an avocado tree, and in that case we might be gentle on the pruning but still try to take it back a little bit so that we can introduce some new things. Okay, we did good. This is a reminder more for those who will look at the PDF later, the text part. And I tried to create a visual. This is not one system. I wish I had a good example, but anyway, this is an image of a nice dense consortium. I think people can appreciate these tree lines are really full and it's getting to the point where it needs pruning. You can see it's kind of overgrown. And then here in this picture you can see the banana pseudostems have been cut and laid on the ground. There's tons of leaf material that they're mulching that tree line with. And then you can plant at that moment. And then at that moment there will be this big growth response. You'll get a return. That's it for the cut. So that's part of, I consider syntropic, it's like dancing. You're allowing your system to grow real strong, you're cutting it, you get this growth, and then it's this back and forth. And I have some images from Haiti where I try to visualize that at the end of the talk. So
one of the things when you prune a tree heavily, the root system dies back and it regenerates. So you get the underground regeneration happening
as well
as on top.
That's a really good point. There's root slough. So when you real heavy prune, the tree will lose some old roots. It opens channels. It feeds below, and that is part of it. But what's interesting, actually, the newest soil science, for the longest time, it was felt that it was the organic material that builds soil the fastest. You know, the cutting and the mulching and the decomposition. But the newest soil science is suggesting it's actually the soil exudates, or those sugars, that are much more important. They call it the liquid pathway as opposed to like the solid pathway. So when you're cutting and you're getting all the sugars in the roots, that's probably the most important thing for soil regeneration. But the material is good for weeding. Okay, so the last, we're 2 C's. The last C is cover. So with all that material that we just cut, we're covering the soil. And who can tell me a reason for why that's important to do?
Retains moisture.
Retaining moisture. Good.
So protects the roots which are just under the surface from creating.
That's super important. The temperature reduction. They've tested sometimes when it's just a normal day here, like 19 degrees or something in the air. It can be 25, 30 hotter if you have bare soil. The soil just bakes. So does the soil life.
Weed suppression.
Weed suppression, exactly. Water retention.
Infiltration.
Infiltration, preventing erosion. Okay, I think we got those. And then here's some images. This is a system in Haiti. I'm not sure if they brought that in. I think they had grown grass first because they didn't have a lot of organic material, and then they were cutting it and windrowing it to create these future tree lines. Now there's actually trees in there. They're hard to see, but they create a perfect little planting bed. And then you also need to prepare the soil, which is something that we'll be doing this afternoon. And then it also shows you hardly have to wash your vegetables if you have really good mulching. When it rains, it's not getting dirt and sand over everything. This is an image from a project in Madagascar. Here they had very limited organic material, and we always say do it right or don't do it at all. So instead of just spreading a thin little amount, we try to really mulch with, for the tree rows, it's sometimes like this much. It depends a little bit on the material. If you don't put enough, you'll basically just be growing weeds even better. If the weeds can get through, they'll love the mulch. So this is exact same planting scheme the whole way. All the same plants were planted. And you guys can see the darker material here. This is where they mulched what they had very aggressively. And look at the growth response there. So if we have farmers that are really hesitant to do this and to plant trees and stuff, the first thing I'll just start with them, I say, let me have a little corner of your property or a couple rows of corn, and you mulch. And then they can see like one of these principles, what it looks like, and they can get a feeling for it. Where I'm consulting down in Kazangula right now, they have a side operation for chili. And once I did this talk, they got out there and started mulching all those chilies because they haven't had rain in like 10 days. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what you need to do, right? Okay, so those are the 3 C's. Let's say them all together. Cultivate, cut, cover. You're going to remember those this afternoon? Cultivate, cut, and cover. Okay. So now I just have a couple like images from systems to go over here, and then we'll finish up this lecture. So this is a eucalyptus plantation in Brazil where they grow these for timber. They can come and cut these. These trees grow back real strong. They're super fast, good hardwood. But what you might appreciate is it does not look healthy. And when you plant trees by side that are of all the exact same species, you're missing the diversity. Here you're also missing the different vertical levels, the stratums. And wind can come through these systems that dries out the soil. They have problems with forest fires. And the eucalyptus has been falsely accused as being a bad tree, when in reality, it's the practice. So down here, you also have eucalyptus, same species of tree, planted in a Syntropic consortium where they're growing citrus as the primary crop, but they have mombasa and bananas and other tree species. Look how green that is. And they've been, not only did they plant in density, but they've been pruning them. You might be able to see a level where the trees have been pruned. So the eucalyptus, if you treat it like it would be in its natural environment, it's actually pumping water into the soil. It's fantastic for bringing fertility and moisture in. It's not the tree that's the problem, it's the practice. So. Here's another image, and I include this to help people know that syntropic farming isn't a recipe. I'll give some designs tomorrow. That is not syntropic farming. Syntropic farming is these principles, and if you know them well and you're provided with different situations, you come up with different recipes for each situation. And what might be a perfect tree in Haiti for me, it might be something totally different here. In fact, we don't use any, we had a very hard time cultivating eucalyptus there. It's kind of finicky and it's hard to plant direct seed. So actually we have almost no eucalyptus in Haiti, although that's a popular one in Brazil. So there's all different ways to do it, and this is a semi-arid environment in Brazil where they have tried to create a system to feed cattle, and they're using prickly pear here. And they basically use this dense consortium. They came and cut, and they kept building the soil with this organic material until they have a lot of biomass. And now you can bring a cow in here. This is a thornless variety and feed them. Okay, next images are from Haiti. The first area that we started doing trainings at, it was perfect in that it had a facility we could use and farmland, but not so perfect in the quality of the soil. It was very degraded. Like at two and a half years, our bananas we planted are still like knee high, and everywhere you look around, the natural like forest is like 2 meters, 3 meters tall. It's very stunted growth. They have very intense dry season. So we did what we do. On the far left here, this is a tree line. And one thing I want to mention in Haiti, we devised this strategy so it was accessible to like a normal family farmer, which meant we had to be able to do this without a tree nursery. Most farmers don't have water at their home. They have to fetch everything for their family need, and to water thousands of trees is not doable. The plastic bags are too expensive, shade cloth. I mean, it was not realistic for farmers to have tree nursery. And we know that you can plant directly from seed because these dense systems are like creating a perfect nursery for the seedlings. And actually, when you're successful, the trees are more resilient. They have deeper tap roots. The genetics are more adapted specifically. So that's what we did here. We planted everything by seed. We have branch cuttings as well, trees that will grow from sticks. We mulched it all. We used whatever material we have. And at 2 weeks, you can see we already have some corn, and some of the sticks are starting to grow. Let's go through the progress here a little bit. At 4 weeks, the corn is growing better. There's some cabbage, beans. Look how it is at 6 weeks. I think the next image is 7 weeks. It's really taking off. We go there twice a year, so I didn't get back to see it until 7 months. At this point, it was really, we were really happy with how dense it was. However, we would have pruned it earlier if we had been there. Some of the baby trees were struggling a little bit, and right now we're actually pruning. That's what these guys on the far right are doing. So we came through. I didn't get an after cut picture on this one. I wish I did, but we'll show you some other images. So here's at 1.5 years. We start getting pictures from up on top of a building now to get a better visual. And this is, I think, a before and after. It looks greener because I took this in the afternoon and the other one in the morning, but you can see how dense it was, and then we came through and really chopped it down. I mean, most people will be like, oh man, you just ruined everything, but it keeps coming back. So here's 2 years. Look how green it is compared to the surrounding environment. And the bananas are starting to, a couple of the bananas are starting to grow. And then this is that 2 years immediately after pruning. Again, come through. This is at the beginning of rainy season, so we can really do a dense pruning. And this is 2.5 years. The system now is like 3.5 years, almost 4 years old, but we didn't get a picture this last visit. And then I just tried to, these are some mahogany all grown by seed. So it's a very difficult, I've seen 2.5-year-old systems where the trees are like this big and that tall, but for the quality of soil, I was satisfied that we got a system established, and soon it'll be past that point where it's vulnerable. So one of my friends in Haiti read my guidebook. I wrote a guidebook in 2019, and he had little bit better quality soil. Actually, it was he tells me it was cracked and dry. He could put his hand in the cracks of the soil. It was so bad, but the potential was not so far away, because this is at 5 years. I've been through and visited, and now he has trees that are like 4, 5, 6 meters tall, tons of fruit coming from all different sort of fruit trees. It's really a beautiful example. So we're almost done with the lecture. I just want to summarize this again, what we went through, especially for people who missed it. So all soil has the potential to be fertile, and it's microlife that unlocks that fertility. And a dense forest creates the environment that needs. So that's kind of one important thing. And then the 3 keys or the 3 C's are the principles that we use to create that dense forest. What are those 3 C's? Are cultivate, cut, cover. Okay.